Hi, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insights. I don't know what that is.
Sorry about that. That was my Ring doorbell.
Oh, okay. I thought I was blowing up or something. Um,
No.
this is William Becker, and I'm here with my good friend Rick Hale. And Rick
Hello.
is an author, a longtime paranormal investigator. He's got three books we'll talk about. He's been on documentary movies. He's done it all, I think, in a lot of ways. And Rick, welcome. I'm really glad to have you on.
Thank you, William, for having me. I appreciate
Oh, you're welcome. I first met Rick when he was on the Paranormal Underground radio show. He and my friend Karen Fraser co-hosted the show, and I got to be on several times that way. And it's a
it. Yeah,
lot of fun. Mhm. Now,
yeah. Really enjoyed it.
good. You've been in the field now. How long?
Well, I first got interested in this way back in the summer of 1982 when
Okay.
I was 8 years old. I had a real positive experience. I interacted with an apparition in my grandparents' home in Franklin Park, Illinois, which is just northwest of Chicago. So it's about maybe
Okay.
about 20-minute drive or so. And I got interested back when I was about 8 years old, and so for between the ages of 8 and 17 was all just reading about things like ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists and monsters and aliens. It all pretty much just came together. And yeah, I did my first investigation in 1991 when I was 17.
Okay.
So it's
And how did
been a long time. I tell people that I grew up in this field.
It sounds like it. Now, what were your early resources, guides, mentors? In those days, we didn't have much really out there.
No, you really didn't. It's not like today where you can just go into any library or any bookstore and you can find literally hundreds of books on the subjects of ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists and psychic phenomena. You couldn't find that
Hmm.
back then.
Right.
But I was lucky because I grew up between northern Lake County, Illinois, and Chicago, Illinois. So my parents were divorced, so I grew up between the city and in the country. So I had two pretty decent libraries that I could go to. My early resources and early influences were, of course, Hans Holzer, his books,
Hmm.
and Peter Underwood. For the most part, my earliest influences were English investigators and writers like Peter Underwood, Guy Lyon Playfair, Elliot O'Donnell. I really learned a lot from those gentlemen who are now since passed.
Right. Now, what about, oh, shoot, his name is escaping me, and I've been to his grave and to his house and to the Foley Rectory and Church. Um,
Harry Price.
yeah, yeah. What about him? Was he out there much that and available, or what did you think of his work?
Yeah, his one book, The Most Haunted House in England, which was about Borley Rectory. Of course,
Hmm.
that was one that I had read early on, and the librarians would see me coming, and they're like, "Oh man, there's that weird kid again asking about books about ghosts." But yeah, it's a lot of my early influences were English writers and English investigators.
Okay. It seems to have so many haunted places to investigate. Um,
Yeah.
makes it fun.
No, I've never actually been to the United Kingdom and Ireland, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'm hoping to one day to make and see some of these places that not only have I read about over the years, but I've also written about many of these places over the years as well.
Right. Actually, this is a good segue into tell us a little bit more about your books. And you've also got the articles on the online newsletter. And I mean, your work comes up frequently, articles and stories. And on Facebook, and they're
Yeah.
always fascinating.
Oh, thank you. I like to keep myself busy, and
Hmm.
writing is just something that comes naturally for me. Punctuation, grammar, putting sentences together, it's always come very naturally for me. But I have my three books here, and my first one, which is The Geek's Guide to the Strange and Unusual, Poltergeist, Ghosts, and Demons. That was my first book. And my second book, which is a memoir and a guide of sorts. It's called Behold, Shocking True Tales of Terror, and some other spooky stuff. And the third book, which just came out a month ago, is called Bullets, Booze, and Babes, The Haunted History of Chicago and Illinois, which is, my pretty much a love letter to my to the place that spawned me and raised me. So, and we do
That
have, being from a city like Chicago, Illinois, we have a great deal of haunted places. I mean, I like to tell people, sometimes I'll get people that's like, well, you'll see like those memes on Facebook or on Instagram, and they're like, name a place that's haunted that's near you. And to me, I'm just like Chicago, the whole damn city.
and you're right. You're absolutely right. I got to spend a week there about 4 years ago.
Hmm.
Friends of mine were there for a job for a bit, and um, everywhere. And I took, of course, one of the ghost tours at night and all that too. And you learn even more. But um, you're
Hmm.
right. It's just you walk down the street and you see ghosts. At least I did.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah,
um,
you of course are a gifted individual, so I may be somewhat
it,
sensitive, but I'm psychic as a rock.
well, people that say that we just need to be able to work together, and I can do that via Skype and such. We don't have to be in person because
Mhm.
everybody's got the talents and the abilities. It's just letting them open up, and our histories are past. I mean, all kinds of things shut us down. But
Sure.
uh, if you had, did you have imaginary friends as a kid?
No, I didn't. I
I,
didn't have imaginary friends. It was a very long time between my first initial ghost sighting when I was a child, and I
uh,
didn't see another. I didn't have another um, sighting of a supernatural entity until my very first investigation when I was 17. And even then,
okay.
I'm not willing to call that a ghost, because I do believe that I dealt with a legitimate poltergeist in that investigation, and that the
Hmm.
entity that appeared in front of me was a thought form created by the
Okay.
poltergeist.
Okay.
So it wasn't a
No,
ghost in the strictest sense of the word.
right. I understand. I like to use the word entity a lot, just to not try to put too big of a box or a definition on anything. That like, ghost is slips in as kind of a vernacular as well. But um,
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-all phrase.
mhm.
But of course, when it comes to things like ghosts and spirits, they're um, they're very specific. According to parapsychology, a ghost is a psychic imprint of an unintelligent image that is played back
Mhm.
over and over again, whereas the spirit is actually the consciousness that has survived the death of the body. So there is a difference, although the term ghost is the old-fashioned term, and it's the term, it gets used interchangeably.
Yeah, and I have some trouble even with the definitions that they have now. I find that um, a lot of times there's pieces of consciousness and such,
Mhm.
but not the soul. The soul's moved on, but there's still that other piece. And then there are visitors that come to hang out and visit sometimes, um, and some that just like to be around. But um,
Yeah.
it's an interesting field with all of the definitions people put into it, and I find it doesn't always work. Even like with poltergeists, um, I know I've run into entities that are very much human caused. You can tell
Yeah,
they're created by emotion, the anger in the house or whatever. And then there
right.
are other times the reports are of activity, and I've even seen it, but they're not created by people. They're created by entities there that have enough energy to lock a door or throw
Yeah.
a steam pitcher off the table or something like that. And
Well,
move
I do
chairs
believe,
and
right. When I do believe that when, as far as poltergeists are concerned, I don't believe that that is a ghost or a demon, as people have tried to say. I do believe in what traditional psychical research or parapsychology has to say, that it is that it's kind of like a psychic haywire of sorts within a person,
mm-hmm.
and it gets pushed out into the environment. Now, you do
Okay.
have poltergeist cases where apparitions have been seen, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
possibility that this psychic energy that is pushed out from a person is either able to drag in or wake up existing or power existing ghostly activity in a location.
Right. Right. I, I agree with that, and I've experienced that in places too. How do you feel about the whole topic of cleansing and cleaning? It's, there seems to be a lot of that. Um, trying to get entities out of spaces.
Yeah,
Not to put you on
I,
the spot. I know it's controversial.
no, not at all, because I think that it's a viable topic of discussion. I am not the kind of person that is going to go into a haunted place and tell a ghost that they need, or excuse me, a spirit entity, ghost, whatever.
Mhm.
I'm just going to use the term ghost for the sake of brevity. I'm not
Right.
going to tell a ghost that you can't be here, because chances are they're still there because they still view that as being their spot.
Right.
So if anything, what I'm going to do is I will work with the psychic, and I prefer working with psychics. If I can't work with one, that's okay too. But
Hmm.
if I can convince, or the psychic can convince a spirit to live with their human roommates, then that's
Hmm.
exactly what I'm going to do. But I am not the kind of person that's going to walk into a haunted location and try to evict or cleanse a a haunted place. That's not for me to do. I think that is incredibly egotistical for me to say
Hmm.
you can't be here, although this is your place.
Right.
I don't think that's
I
right.
agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. I work with the inhabitants, the breathing inhabitants as well, to set ground worlds, find a way you can coex- coexist, and it usually works pretty well. And I
Mm-hmm.
also encourage them not to do an investigation. They don't want a bunch of activity, because when you're investigating, you're asking for activity, and then you're having to say, "Okay, that was fine. Now don't do it again."
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
But if during an investigation I do come across a ghost that is, does want to go, and I do have a psychic that I work with, or that
Hmm.
I'm working with one, and they want to help that spirit to go, then that's exactly what we're
Hmm.
going to do. I'm reminded of a of an investigation I did in Kane County, Illinois, which is a very rural part of northern Illinois,
Okay.
and this ghost was just, it was causing hell for this poor family. It was appearing, it was throwing things, it was angry, and it didn't want to stop. So we were
Right.
able to speak with this entity through a psychic medium that I was working with. Her name is Nancy Laporta. We've worked with her for a few
I've
years,
heard,
and
I've heard of
it
her.
was yeah, it was determined that the reason this young man was so angry, because in the 1950s he committed suicide because he was gay,
Hmm.
and he didn't know how to tell his family that he was gay, and
Hmm.
So he committed suicide because of it.
Yeah.
We were finally able to convince this young man. He was a young man in his early 20s. We were able to convince him that he did not have to fear the afterlife because of his sexual preference, and that it was
Mm-hmm.
okay. And he was able to understand, and he left. And this family no longer had any issues with a haunting anymore because we were
Mm-hmm.
able to convince this young man that he was okay and that he was able to go off and enjoy his afterlife. And that is one of those investigations that I really, really feel I did some good work there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's impressive. And you feel like it was his whole being that was still there in the house, that none of
Yeah.
him had really left yet. Yeah. I find that it happens, but it's very rare, I think, where it's the whole being that's left. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good story. We're getting some good comments. People are loving the show or the
Oh, good.
conversation like that. So I
Hello.
appreciate it. And
Happy to have what's happened. There we go.
okay,
There
yeah,
we go.
the fun of live technology. Um,
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to hear a little bit more too about the event at your grandfather's house, that first interaction with a ghost.
Well, I was 8 years old. I was just a little kid. And
Mhm.
it was at a time I was going through a really, really hard time. My parents were going through a divorce. And it was the weekend with my dad at his parents' house in Franklin Park.
Mhm.
And my cousin and I, we had just gotten done watching a Chicago Cubs game. Of course, they lost miserably because it's the Chicago Cubs. So we were sleeping in the front room, and he had already fallen asleep, and I had to get up and use the bathroom.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you know how these really, really old flats are in Chicago. You have the front room area, and then you have
Mhm.
a big long hallway that leads back to there's a bedroom, and then it leads back to the kitchen and the rear of the flat.
Kind of like
Well,
the shotgun flats, are they called?
yeah, I get, yeah, sure. And in this hallway there was no light, but there was a bathroom to the right and there was a bedroom to the left. That bedroom to the left was where my dad was sleeping, and my sister wasn't with that weekend because she had mono, so she couldn't be there. And so my grandmother always left the light on in the bathroom and the door cracked open so us kids could see it when we would go to the bathroom.
Mhm.
And I'm approaching the bathroom and I see movement, like a shadow moving around in the bathroom. And I thought, I'm like,
Mhm.
all right, my grandparents, somebody must be using the bathroom. So I'm standing there waiting for them to come out. All of a sudden, the light flicks off, and I am in darkness. And it is dark except for the light of the moon that's coming in through the window in my dad's bedroom.
Mhm.
And so I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, this woman comes walking out of the bathroom. Now, my grandmother was about 5 feet if she was lucky. This
Mhm.
woman was a lot taller than 5 feet. I would say she was probably maybe 5'6", 5'7". She was a very tall woman.
Mhm.
And I'm looking up at her, and I have no idea who this person is. Never seen her in my life. And I come from a very small family. And all of a sudden she turns, she looks down at me, she grabs my chin or touches my chin, like strokes my chin like this. And she says, "My, what a fine young lad." And then she smiles, she walks away, and I watch as she just poof, just fades away and vanishes.
That's incredible. Could you
Yeah.
actually
See,
feel her touch?
I could feel her touch, and I always, in the best way that I can describe it is that it felt like static electricity.
Okay.
on my face.
Right.
And I wasn't the only person in this. I was, but besides my grandmother, I was the only person to have actually ever also seen her. But we had out of town cousins, like my cousin Vicky, who lives in Birmingham, Alabama. She was
Hmm.
visiting when she was a kid, and she got too close to the stove, and she told me that she could hear a woman with an accent say in her ear, "Don't get too close to the stove because you'll burn yourself."
Wow.
And my cousin Luis, he had um, experiences as well. Like he could, feel somebody watching him. And oh, thank you, Katie. And you would hear things, like move, like footsteps and movements and stuff like that when nobody was there. And it
Hmm.
was just, we all knew that there was something odd about my grandparents' house, and we all just sort of accepted it. And come to find out later on that this spirit was actually Mrs. McNett, who was the deceased wife of the man that owned my grandparents' building in Franklin Park.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they actually lived in this flat before they had moved upstairs. Well, she had died, and he moved upstairs, and my grandparents moved in about 10 years prior. So
Okay.
yeah, that was. You get a lot of people who are always like, well, I had this really bad experience with ghosts, and that's all I've ever had ever since. And it's like I can't say that. I've never
Yeah.
had. I did not have an initial um, experience with the spirit world that was bad. My initial experience, I believe, was very positive, very
Hmm.
life affirming, and it
Hmm.
really set me on this path of discovery that I've been on almost 40 years now.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now,
Yeah.
have you even had any bad experiences with them? I know I haven't. I've had
I
some
mean,
that have tried, and you just tell them, knock it off. And they do.
sorry, that was my Ring doorbell again. Um,
Okay.
probably the Amazon guy delivering something. But I can't. I've had a few experiences that were not not positive, but
Hmm.
also not negative
Hmm.
in like a really bad sense of the word. An investigation I did in McHenry, Illinois, um, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. I had a young man who was being bullied, and he invited something into the home, and
Oh,
that is the only time that I've ever experienced something where I could say that maybe it was inhuman, but not demonic, but
right.
something that he sort of like invited in, and it was just causing all sorts of problems for him and his family. Thankfully, we were able to resolve the issue and send this thing packing. That was one of the very few instances, very rare and few instances, where I would say that yeah, that I may have dealt with something that wasn't of this world, I guess you might
Hmm.
say.
Okay. Was that a documentary?
No,
Did you do it?
no,
Okay.
no.
I,
That was when I was working with the McHenry County Paranormal Research Group. I worked with them for
okay.
about 3 or 4 years. That was the first and only time that I will ever work with a large group of investigators. It wasn't it wasn't a bad or negative experience. I tend to be very traditional in my approach. Usually myself,
Hmm.
an assistant, and if working with a psychic. So
Okay.
two or three people, I think, is a modest amount of investigators to be working with. MCPRG had there would be 10 people tripping around each other in a two-bedroom house, and that's just not that's not a good thing.
No, I know when I've worked with groups that were larger, would take shifts in and out so that
Yeah.
not everybody would be there at once. But everybody would have an opportunity, and things react differently to different people too. I
Sure.
mean, the the non-breathing are just like us, and they have certain people they feel more comfortable talking to and
Mhm.
reacting with, and certain that they don't, and so it makes a difference, I think. This
Yeah,
is fascinating.
yeah. What I did have a, I did enter somewhat into the entertainment area of this back in 2014. I was in the
Hmm.
documentary called Ghost Tapes 2 with
Right?
uh,
I've seen
with
it.
Luke Millett. Yeah, with Luke Millett, who is he's a brilliant filmmaker. I
Hmm.
did that Ghost Tapes 2 and Ghost and 3 or 4 episodes of Ghost Tape the series, which can be found on YouTube. That was a great experience too. I've always specialized in investigating private homes. A lot of times
Hmm.
I joke with people that if I'm in your home, it's because you wanted me there. So I'll joke,
Right.
like that. But this was like one of the rare times where I investigated a location. In one of those episodes, or in Ghost Tapes 2, we did the Sci-Fi Cafe, which was previously owned by Mary Sutherland. I know you know Mary, right?
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. She is
Yeah.
a she's another paranormal writer and investigator and researcher. And in Ghost Tapes 2, we investigated her Sci-Fi Cafe, which used to be in Burlington, Wisconsin, which is about a half hour or so away from here. So it was like it
Okay.
was a really good experience working with Luke. I always said, I was like, I never will be in front of a camera, but I was, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I like that. I haven't seen the series episodes. I didn't know really those were out there, but I
Yeah,
have
there were 7 or
watched
8 of them.
the the documentary, the the movie, and
Hmm.
I thought it was very good. And
Yeah,
it was done. The investigation is professional and it's real, and you don't feel like anybody's trying to con you or trick you, or
no.
and it's one that I can support.
I have a long standing policy as an investigator. It's like always be professional. Always be
Hmm.
professional. Especially when you're dealing with people, you're going into people's homes, and there have been a few investigations where I've done where people are like, please don't swear at our ghosts, or please don't provoke our ghosts because we have to live here. And it's like I would never dream of going into somebody's house and yelling or swearing or using abusive language in their house or to their ghost, because yeah, first off, they do have to live there with these entities, and
Hmm.
secondly, that's just unprofessional and rude.
Exactly, I agree with you, and that's one of the rules when I'm teaching a class or doing some kind of investigation where I've set it all up. It's like those are part of the rules. We don't do that.
Yeah,
It's there's we're the guest, and we need to treat everybody well.
right.
And
The dead
if
and the
you
living.
want, yeah, if you want a swearing match, you're in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
Um,
The last thing I ever want is for myself or my family, sitting here watching a Cubs game and somebody runs in and they're like, "You're gonna get out of this mother effing house," and it's like, slow down. Obviously I would not want somebody yelling at me like that, so I'm not going to go in and yell at somebody like that, either breathing or not breathing.
right. And there's something else with this too that I think a lot of people don't remember. We're often talking to beings who lived in a different time period that had
Right.
very different etiquette and style. And I mean, and I'm not picking on anybody now, but when you and I go in dressed in t-shirts and the jeans, which is often how I'll do it,
Yeah.
if we're looking at a place where the entities are maybe from the 1880s or even the early 1900s, we're very rudely dressed. we can get away with it because at least we're somewhat covered and men got away with more things. But then you
Yeah,
have a woman going in dressed like that, or with tattoos, or really short sleeves, or maybe a short skirt or shorts or something like that, and it's scandalous because
sure.
women weren't allowed to dress like that in those days. And
Right.
so if you have somebody stuck in a time period, their reaction to us, and not just what we say, but how we react and how we look, and
Right.
manners help smooth all those other things over. I'm not saying that women need to wear corsets and long skirts to go on an investigation, although
Yeah.
sometimes doing period dress helps sometimes make the entities feel more comfortable and more interactive. And it's,
Right.
like playing music from a period or something too. So I've done that. But
Well, I would never go to a location, like I'm wearing my Wax Tracks Records T-shirt here, or I'm wearing
mhm,
like my Joy Division T-shirt or Typo Negative T-shirt. I would never do an investigation dressed like that because I think that that's improper. Try to be as well dressed as you can, but also too, I think the way you act on an investigation
mhm,
is very much key. For example, if you go to a place where the entity is or the ghost is from, like you said, the late 1800s or early 1900s, and it's a woman, she's very prim, very proper. um you know Manners is key to
yes,
to people in the Victorian era. They're not
mhm,
they're going to run and hide from you if you go in there with guns blazing and screaming and yelling at them using cuss words, because that is they're just not going to react to that.
even going in using their first names. If,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Mrs. Mister. Um, Unless you happen to know the the entity, who the history of the person that's haunting the place, and know that they were radically different. Um, you're you've got to put yourself back in their shoes,
Hmm.
and that's part of the fun of doing the work, I think. And for me, I mean, I like it. It's wonderful when there are experiences and you can get proof,
Hmm.
but I like the interaction with the entities. That's my favorite part.
I
I
do
get
too.
to make fun, and when I can get them to talk to me, and that kind of thing is when I'm happiest. In one of these, I can go wander off on my own and just sit down and have a conversation, and it's, okay,
Oh,
I'm good now. I can leave. But,
yeah. Well, what's good about you is being a psychically gifted person. You you get that interaction immediately, whereas somebody like myself who is not gifted with mediumship or clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience, I'm not gifted with that. So if I'm actually lucky to get something, I have to wait and see that interaction later.
right.
There was a there was an investigation I did in Waukegan, Illinois, which is just south of the Wisconsin border along Lake Michigan. And
Mhm.
I write about it in my book in the chapter called The House of 100 Spirits. I was doing an EVP session, and I call it the House of 100 Spirits because I do believe that there are 100 spirits in this house. This house was extraordinarily haunted.
Wow.
And yeah, later on, listening back at the EVPs, I asked the question, how do you come into this home? And you hear a voice, plain as day. My wife heard it, and Jamie is not into this stuff. You
Uh-huh.
could hear a male's voice say, they want us to come in through the window. So you're lucky. You get to have that interaction immediately. I have to wait, you know, a day or two or a week or whatever to hear that kind of interaction. But when I'd have to say that, I know that everybody loves video, and I know that everybody loves the pictures, but catching that full-bodied apparition is extraordinarily rare.
Right.
But getting an EVP, man, I love EVPs. I can listen to EVPs all day long, and I
Well,
have.
it's hard for me to hear them sometimes,
Hmm.
but and a lot of times, and especially with some of the equipment, ghost boxes and stuff people use, there's so much other noise. It's difficult. Well, the noise drives me crazy to begin with, but
Yeah,
it's
me too.
difficult to hear the words through the noise sometimes for me. But when you have EVPs that are clear, can't be anything else,
Yeah.
it's like, well, it sounds like this, but maybe it's this, or maybe it's this. Um, but just like the one you were talking about, that's those are mind blowing, and
Yeah.
I've found and heard them that have happened in really busy places. I've been in places where we've gotten really good EVPs, even though there's a lot of street noise going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I try to I try to and I try to keep things as quiet and simple as possible. I don't
mhm,
use a lot of this equipment that you see um, a lot of ghost hunters use these days, you know, things like the REM pod and the ghost box. And I don't,
mhm,
it's just all that is just too much noise, and it's too
mhm,
much background noise, and it's too much to set up, and it's too much to break down. Me personally, you know, being an old school ghost hunter, I like using the basics and keeping it very simple. You know, I'll use an EMF meter, um,
mhm,
tape recorder, a camera, and Jamie got me these. My wife, you know, for your listeners, she got me
mhm.
these really great um, dowsing rods.
Oh,
She got them. Yeah, she got them off Amazon for me. And you know, as soon as I'm able to, I'm going to go out and I'm going to use those. I have used dowsing rods in the past, and I liked them. And you know,
mhm.
so I'm looking forward to being able to use these.
I haven't used them much, and I think they have a lot of possibility, but it's so difficult if you just unconsciously move your hand slightly, you
Mhm.
you cause movement, and they can cross or
Right.
uncross. It can be so difficult to make sure that you're getting an accurate statement,
Yeah, it's called
and
the
that it,
idiometer.
yeah, and
Yeah.
um, but I've seen them work over and over again, and I know people I trust that swear by them.
Mhm.
So I'd like to I'd like to work with them a bit and just see, but you also have to have a pretty steady hand, I think, not just not moving it, but not shaking much.
Right. Yeah, you really do. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, I've used them and I liked them. I think one of the most interesting experiences I've ever had with dowsing rods was I went to Old South Pittsburgh Hospital. This was back in, I think it was in 2013 or 2014, and I went there with like
Okay.
a tour group, and we were down in the basement, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the girls that I was with, she had the dowsing rods, and she was asking questions, and I could, you know, tell by her hand that she was not moving her hand. She had a very steady hand,
Right.
and they were crossing to answer yes, and uncrossing for no. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking at her face, and it wasn't her face anymore. It was the face of a different woman. Like she
Wow.
was this, yeah, she was a young woman. She was like strawberry blonde hair. She had a very round face, but the woman's face that I was seeing was very severe looking, and it had long brown hair. And this was, and I looked at her and I'm like, Michelle, is that you? And all of a sudden she screams, "Don't stare at me!" And then the other face that I was seeing was gone, and whatever we were
Wow.
communicating with the dowsing rods was gone as well. Yeah, it was a very very dramatic um, situation.
Were you able to get a photograph of her with the changed face?
I was not. I didn't. I had my camera on me, but I
Mhm.
was so focused on making sure that her hands weren't moving, that she wasn't trying to get slick with those dowsing rods. And I just
Hmm.
happened to look up and I see this other woman's face. It probably lasted maybe half a second to a second. And then she screamed, "Don't
Right.
stare at me or don't look at me." And then the face. So yeah, I wish that I could have gotten a photograph of this, but all I have to go on this is a personal experience. And unlike what we're told, the personal experience to me is everything, because without the personal experience, why bother investigating?
Right. And the
It's that
personal
personal
experience
experience
can
that
help
spawns it.
validate. Yeah, that meter reading doesn't mean a thing,
Right.
except that there's some kind of a spike in an EMF field or
Or somebody's cell
whatever
phone
it
is
is.
ringing, you don't know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the experience that puts all of this into perspective,
Right.
and being able to then start to feel where people are because of cold spots or
Hmm.
something and finding out. And then sometimes being able to tell if that's a child or if it's an adult or something, just simply because you can feel. And actually, this is kind of weird. I put my hand out over here, not thinking, but it's warmer here and it's cooler here. And they're on my leg. Anyway, and I live in a very tight house. There's no
Hmm.
wind, it's not dry. Um, the heat's not running right now. I'm not going to
Yeah,
say, pardon me?
right. I was just going to say, but I don't know how many times I've, done investigations in homes, and I was able to, give the people some relief and let them know that, that cold draft that you're feeling, that's not a ghost. You need to call your contractor and have them look at your windows. Or,
Right,
the creepy feeling that you're getting is because you're either you're either dealing with high EMFs that's coming off of your electricity, or you're dealing with infrasound, which is a
hmm,
sound that is just comes underneath 20 megahertz. Humans can't hear it, but it does have a neurological effect on people. Or in a
right,
couple of rare occasions where people didn't know this, but they actually had um, faint seepage of carbon monoxide that was building up in their house. And carbon monoxide can cause you to have things like hallucinations and feelings of sickness and feelings of paranoia and being watched.
yeah,
So it's like, you don't have a ghost in your house. You don't need a ghost hunter. You need a contractor, and you need to get him in here
right.
immediately.
Well, in my part of the world, with all the volcanoes and such, we also have radon,
Right.
and you don't, and radon's naturally occurring. It seeps up. It has nothing to do with your heating and cooling system. Parts of Portland, several years ago, there was a big um, push in putting in alarms and registries and fans in crawl spaces
Mhm.
and basements to exit the radon out of so to go outside instead of up to the house.
Okay.
Um, and that's an important one too. Now the
Yeah.
infrasound. Do we have a way of measuring that yet? Because I've been hearing more and more about that.
We
But
do. There are ways of measuring infrasound. One of the pioneer of infrasound is named Dr. Steve Parsons. He's in England, and there are. I can't really think right off the top of my head what they're called, but there are infrasound meters that where you can measure infrasound, but you're not you know like where I live on a farm out in the country. We're not going to have a whole lot of infrasound. But when you live like when we were living in Chicago, we lived right by the L track, the elevated train track. You're going to get a
mhm,
lot of infrasound. So you get a lot of places in the city where people are experiencing infrasound, or near airports, train stations, anything like that where there is high decibel noise. It can cause this low megahertz noise that does affect us. And there is equipment out there. I can't afford it. where you can you can measure for infrasound.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I don't think I can afford it either, but it's one of the things that I think we need to be made more and more aware of, because that could
Mhm.
even account then for some of the sounds we hear in our ears, different kinds of things. I'm pretty lucky. I live in a, well, you know, up there are pluses and minuses. I live in a suburb right now, and
Mhm.
so the houses, my parents had it built 25 years ago, and these were all fields when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so we don't have a lot of the city noise. We also don't have any of the conveniences, but um, we I'm not on a jet flight path most of the
Yeah.
time, especially with COVID. The train tracks are 2 or 3 miles away.
Same here.
The trains are barely audible. Um, we don't have high traffic where I am. I can go for hours without a car going by. It's almost like being in the country. So
Mhm.
um, a lot of those things I don't have to worry about. And it's an all electric house. We don't have gas
Wow,
in
nice.
so I don't have to worry about the carbon dioxide, or
But you
monoxide,
do have to worry about EMF.
but EMF, yep.
Yeah.
And I go around and check the panels and stuff, and so far everything is pretty good.
Good.
But in this house, even when my parents were still alive, so it's not just them, there's all kinds of activity. Mostly things going through shadows, people, bed shaking. A
Mhm.
friend of mine stayed and got rather scared when her bed shook on her twice in the guest room.
We live in a 100-year-old farmhouse, and it is probably the most unhaunted 100-year-old farmhouse of all time. So it's very quiet here spiritually.
How did you manage that? I mean, frankly, I
Management.
would have expected to find probably the only older house in the area that isn't haunted. And
I have
you're
no
an
idea, but
investigator.
yeah, I mean, we manage that. There's nothing here. We've had a couple psychics come through, and we've lived here 5 6 years now. Never seen, never heard anything. So it's all good. I'm
Mhm.
okay with that.
Yeah, it's nice to not bring your work home with you,
Yeah,
so to speak.
exactly.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, you said Jamie's not really interested, but how about your son? Your son, is he interested?
He's asked me questions, and he knows what Dad does. He knows what I write about, and
Hmm.
but you know he's 9 years old.
Hmm.
I don't want him to have to deal with issues of life, death, and afterlife until he's much more mature. Although he's very mature for a 9 year old, he's still nine
Yeah,
years
he
old.
is. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to use his name in public either, just to
no, it's okay. It's Theo.
remember. Yeah. Um, yeah, some kids, I wasn't sure if he was taking after his dad getting interested real early through an experience or not, but
No,
he
not
was
yet. What's that?
he was really young when you moved into the house.
Yeah, he was he's 9. He was like 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Sorry about that. If you're hearing that again, I'm getting like notifications. I'm using my phone while we do this, so
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem at all. Technology. I'm just glad we can set these things up and do these. Um,
sure.
when I was a kid, this was all science fiction.
Hmm.
Tomorrowland of um, Disneyland had the the phones that you could actually see people while you
Yeah.
talk to them. And, it's maybe one day we'll have all this together,
Hmm.
but so it's kind of fun to be living in the future from my past. But
Right.
now we've got a little bit of time left. Is there anything in particular that you want to make sure that you get out there definitely want to get your websites and everything else too.
Yeah.
But
Just my books, as I've already showed them. I don't, you know what? It's kind of shadowy in here right now, so you probably can't see them. So my three books are The Geek's Guide to the Strange and Unusual, Poltergeist, Ghosts, and Demons. Behold, Shocking True Tales of Terror and some other spooky stuff. And Bullets, Booze, and Babes, The Haunted History of Chicago and Illinois. And I have written for many, many websites. Um, Among those are paranormalunderground.net, which I still contribute to every once in a while. SpookyIsles.com, which is all about the United Kingdom and Ireland. Uh,
mhm.
uh, and the one that I'm currently writing for is paranormalstudy.com.
Okay, excellent. And do you have a website?
No, I don't. People can just find me. They can actually find me through. It's just Rick Hale, on Facebook, or Instagram is author Rick Hale. You can just look me up there. I'm always putting stuff on there. So, and anything. I try to put a lot of music and a lot of funny things up, and so I try not to put too much political stuff up. But every now and then's okay.
Yeah, excellent. Well, good. I'm glad we made sure we got all of that out. We've got about 8.5 minutes or so left. Is there something in particular that you would like people watching this to go away with as far as um, the paranormal field goes, the what we can learn from the entities or from the field in general, um, how this can touch our lives, help, anything along those lines.
Well, I think having any kind of a paranormal experience, when when you walk away that you've known that you have seen and experienced a ghost, I think that it's something that should be able to comfort you, give you
Mm-hmm.
comfort knowing that when you die, a part of yourself does live on, does go on. Yeah, as you know, 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer called synovial cell sarcoma, and I lost my left leg and a part of my lung to it. But a lot of people, they ask me, "Are you afraid to die?" And I think that it's like, no, I'm not really afraid to die because I know the things that I've seen, I know the things that I've experienced, and it kind of gives me hope that
Right.
that a part of us does go on in some way. So death doesn't have to be um, this monster that's lurking around the corner. It a part of us does go.
Excellent. Do you think we should talk more about that in the field in general and during investigations? Or do you think there's too much focus on getting the evidence of the entities and not enough about what all this really means?
I do. I think one of the things that really bugs me about the television shows is that they really kind of present this as being something terrifying, something
Mm-hmm.
scary, rather than something that is, for the most part, life affirming.
Right.
Can give you comfort knowing that, like I said, a piece of you does go on, does continue to exist. It's not scary. It doesn't have to be scary. There aren't evil spirits and demons lurking around every corner, you know, ready, willing, and able to make your life a living hell. I'm not gonna say that those kind of things don't exist because I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that we know enough about the spirit realm
Mm-hmm.
to make that determination. I think that would be egotistical for me to say so. But
Okay.
I do think that there is it's much to learn about human behavior and human spirit and the psychology of what makes us us.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's a beautiful way to put it, and actually a nice way to sum up, I think, and end the show. I want to thank you so much for being on
Thank
today and being part of this, and especially since I know you haven't been feeling real well. And
you know
so,
what? Thankfully, we you know for your listeners, my family and I, we do have COVID, um, and you know we're getting over it. I got over it a little bit quicker than both my wife and my son did, but they're coming along just fine.
yeah, and I'm very glad to hear that. Um, it's it's a very scary time as far as disease goes right now. But
It
what
is.
you just said about the paranormal and how affirming that is, that there is something of us that continues, I think that can help even with some of the fear in the pandemic. Not the fear
Right.
of being sick, but some of the fear of death.
Yeah.
And I think it's well said. So thank you. I would like to do
Thank
this
you.
again. And
Yeah.
people buy his books and read his articles. This man is really an excellent writer. Puts me to
Thank you.
shame. That's so.
Thank.
Um, we'll see everybody again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.